Chapter 6. Back to the Magic Lantern. After the last show had finished at 11 o'clock, the public poured out onto the street and the building became quiet. Even the animals in the zoo ceased their screeching and squawking. Sandy and the boys made their way past the cages and up the stairs to the music hall. As they entered the empty auditorium, Sandy felt for a moment the same atmosphere she'd experienced in her own time, that feeling of abandonment and emptiness waiting to be filled. Sandy used her phone to light the way, and the little gang picked a path through the auditorium to where the magic lantern stood in dimness on its platform at the back of the hall. "The magic lantern was on when I woke up," said Sandy. "Well, that's easy enough," said Jamie, as he walked over to the magic lantern and after a moment's searching found a switch at the back and flicked it down. The electric bulb behind the lens glowed. Its gradually brightening light cut an ever-widening path across the empty music hall and washed over the stage in painted backcloth depicting a Highland Scottish scene. Jimmy, Sam and Charlie made a dash for the beam, but Andrew pulled them back. "Now go stand in the light, over on the stage where you appeared earlier," Jamie instructed as he fiddled with the lens at the front, trying to look as if he knew what he was doing. Sandy made her way through the music hall towards the stage. "I think I was standing around about here, but I don't know," Sandy said as she stepped onto the front of the stage, trying to figure out the exact spot she had landed on. "It's hard to tell. I was standing in front of the stage in my own time, and it was nothing like this one, and the seating, well, it'd been further back, and the floor had a carpet, and—" She looked over to the boys. They weren't listening. They were staring straight past her, wide-eyed and open-mouthed. She turned slowly with some trepidation, expecting to find a giant spider or something creeping towards her. "Oh," she sighed in relief when she saw what the boys were gawping at. The words, "Count back with A-B, get diamond, S," had suddenly appeared on the backcloth behind her. "What does that mean?" asked Andrew. "Who's A-B?" asked Jimmy. "A diamond!" Charlie exclaimed. "Treasure!" Sam gleefully shouted. Jamie was fiddling with the slide carriers behind the lens. "They're empty. There's no slide to project," he announced. "How's that possible?" "I've no idea, but I would say it's confirmation of one thing," said Sam. "There definitely appears to be a ghost in the magic lantern, and I think it's trying to tell us something." And after what had happened and what they had all seen that night, none of them argued the existence of ghosts. In fact, it seemed the only plausible, logical explanation. "Who are they, though? Do you think we know them?" Andrew asked, staring at the words which were beginning to fade. "I don't know any dead people," said Jimmy. "My granddad died. Do you think it's him?" asked Charlie. "Did he have any treasure?" asked Sam. "No, definitely not," answered Charlie sadly. "Then it's probably no your granda," said Sam, slapping his pal on the back. "Has anyone else got something to write the message on before it disappears completely?" Sandy asked. The boys all shrugged. None of them had ever had a need to write anything down before. "Och, it's no difficult. I can remember it. Count back with A-B, whoever A-B is, and get a diamond, S." "Do you think S is the person who wrote the message?" Jamie asked. "Or do you think S is the person the message is for?" The boys all looked at Sandy. "What are you looking at me like that for?" she said. "S, as in Sandy. That message must be for you," said Jimmy. "Not necessarily. It could be from someone whose name begins with S," Sandy replied. "It has to be you." "Of course it does. You came here through the magic lantern from the future," said Charlie. "Stands to reason, don't it? S is for Sandy." The word Sandy very faintly travelled through the air, hissing like the ghost of an echo. "Did you hear that?" she said. The boys looked at her with slightly terrified expressions and nodded. Sandy looked at the magic lantern. "Who's there?" she asked. There was no response. They all looked at the back cloth where the words still faintly lingered. "Count back with A, B, get the diamond, S," Sandy recited again. "What do you mean? Who is A, B? What do you want us to count with them? Where is the diamond you want us to get?" They all stared at the back wall, at the patched sky where the last trace of the words faded, then vanished. They waited for new words, some sort of explanation to appear. Nothing did. The magic lantern beam was empty, and nothing more was whispered. Sam shivered. "This is giving me the creeps." "Me too," agreed Charlie. "Do you have any clue who A.B. is?" Sandy asked. None of the boys knew. The message was a complete mystery. It didn't even make sense. "Are you going to go back through the beam?" Bobby suddenly asked. That was a good question. The message was intriguing and she loved a mystery. Part of her wanted to stay and solve it, but really all she wanted to do was go home. She was tired and stinking. She missed her own clean, comfortable, technologically advanced world and her mum and gran. She looked at the beam that still washed the backdrop. It seemed duller now that the message was gone. It certainly wasn't the incredibly intense light that had brought her here, to this time. The boys looked at her expectantly. "I have to try," said Sandy. She stepped into the amber light and waited, willing herself to travel back to the future, her arms at her sides, her fists clenched, rocking forwards slightly on the balls of her feet and her head thrust forwards and upwards. Nothing happened. "I don't think I can," she said, sounding defeated and deflated. She felt a lump in her throat and the tears threatening again. What if she was stuck here? She desperately wanted to wake up from this nightmare. She closed her eyes as tight as she could and muttered to herself over and over again, "Send me home, send me home, send me home." Still nothing happened, so she screwed her eyes closed even tighter and, remembering the words from The Wizard of Oz, one of her favourite films, began chanting, "There's no place like home, there's no place like home, there's no place like home." There was still no sense of falling or movement through time. She opened her eyes again and looked at the boys, hastily wiping away the few tears that had begun to trickle down her cheeks. "Nope, I'm still here," she said miserably, and gave in to the flood. Sam and Charlie stepped up to either side of her and patted her on the back. "Oh, you're fine with us, aren't you?" said Sam consolingly. "Aye, you're among pals," agreed Charlie. "I don't reckon that thing is going to let you go back to your own time until you've solved that riddle," said Jimmy. The other boys nodded in agreement. Sandy wiped her nose on the back of her coat sleeve and sniffed. Perhaps Jimmy was right. Maybe she had been sent here to solve a mystery. Why else would she be here? And when it's solved, then maybe she would be sent back to her own time. "Yeah," she said wearily, "I must have been sent here for the reason, and that message must be meant for me. Or us," she added as she looked at the boys. "Does any of the message mean anything to you?" asked Andrew. "Not a clue," replied Sandy with a tone of defeat. "Well, what do you think we should do?" asked Sam. "I've no idea," said Sandy dejectedly as she slumped onto one of the benches and folded her arms. "Well, I guess we could go and find Tam," suggested Jamie. "He might know what to do." "Your brother? The one the zookeeper was looking for?" asked Sandy. "Aye, he was operating the magic lantern earlier when you came through it. He lives in the basement," replied Jamie. "What, in that little room behind the monkey cage?" Sandy asked. "Aye, Mr. Pickard lets him live there for free and all by himself," said Jamie proudly, as if the stuffy, smelly little room was a luxury flat. Back in the room behind the monkey house, Andrew and Jimmy relit the lamps. A few embers still glowed in the stove, so Jamie grabbed the iron poker that rested against the stove door and rattled them back into flame, adding some small chunks of coal. The fire roared back to life. "Where d'ye suppose Tam is?" Bobby asked his older brother. "He must be off seeing Nellie or something," Jamie replied. "I'm sure he'll turn up soon, though." "Aye, and we have a lot to tell him," said Bobby gleefully. "Don't worry, I won't mention your future belle," the small boy said, answering a scowl from Sandy. The gang of friends sat around and discussed the strange message and their various theories about ghosts and time travel while they waited for Tam to return. At 1 o'clock in the morning, when he still hadn't come home, the boys decided it was time for bed, and they would come back and see him in the morning. Sandy could stay there for the night. Jamie would stay too, so that he could explain who the stranger was when Tam finally got back. Sandy was glad of the company. She didn't fancy being on her own. So the two new friends made themselves as comfortable as they could on the old chairs, and with the cosy glow from the stove warming their faces, they drifted off to sleep. Well, that's the end of chapter 6. We're halfway to the book being launched on the 2nd of November. If you want to find out what happens next, though, please do tune in again on the 2nd of May. Thank you for listening.